Earlier today, Prime Minister Modi arrived in Kathmandu for the SAARC summit amidst growing speculation he could have a bilateral meeting with Pakistan's Nawaz Sharif. There are many who believe he should. However, there are as many who believe he definitely should not. Clearly, this is a subject where opinion is sharply divided. With me to discuss this critical issue are two of India's most senior former diplomats. They are former High Commissioner to Pakistan Satyabrat Pal and former Foreign Secretary Kanwal Sibal. Mr. Pal, there's a lot of speculation in the media fueled by ambiguous statements made by the Foreign Office spokesperson and equally ambiguous statements made by the Foreign Minister. And I take it that those are in fact deliberately ambiguous statements that suggest that Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Sharif may have a bilateral meeting during the SAARC summit in Kathmandu. Now, given the present situation between the two countries and given the manner in which that relationship has evolved over the last 6 months, do you believe such a meeting would be sensible and wise, or do you think it would be premature and ill-advised?
No, I would certainly recommend a meeting. I think a meeting is necessary between countries with a relationship as fraught as ours. It is when things are falling apart or in danger of falling apart that you need to talk more than at any other time. And particularly, you said that the relationship was evolving. It was in danger of unraveling. And this now, more than ever, is the time when the Prime Ministers should talk. And this should simply be the beginning. It should be the beginning of a sustained dialogue. It can't be stop and start.
So you're saying the real reason why the two Prime Ministers need to meet in Kathmandu is because the situation was unraveling and they need to put their heads together and stitch it back. And if they don't, it will unravel further.
That's been the pattern so far. And I see no reason why, left to its own dynamics, the situation will not get worse.
Now, Kanwal Sibal, if I understand correctly, you believe that beyond a polite handshake and a polite greeting when they run into each other, as inevitably they will, they must not have a specific bilateral meeting. Why do you believe that?
You asking me this question?
Yes, I am.
I think they are going to meet informally. That's quite clear because they retreat into the case just outside Kathmandu when all of them would be together in an informal setting. And it would look almost childish if the Indian and the Pakistani Prime Ministers did not talk to each other. Of course they will talk. And there will be many occasions they'll be sitting
Let me interrupt.
the table.
Let me interrupt. I'm not talking about polite conversations when they meet in a group of other people. That will happen and they must be polite. Meeting.
I don't think that there should be a specific bilateral meeting with a set agenda that's not called for. And I can't see where the basis is for such a meeting at this present stage.
Explain to me why you think there shouldn't be a specific bilateral meeting between the two Prime Ministers.
Because the conditions have not been created for that from the Pakistani side. Because Nawaz Sharif has again said that he's going to meet the Hurriyat leaders, separatist leaders or Kashmiri leaders before he talks to our Prime Minister. He said that he has again reiterated that this will have to be settled on the basis of UN resolution. You know, the funny thing is that Pakistan's minimum demands are actually not something that we concede. Because if they want that Kashmir...
I take your point. The Pakistan has not created the right conditions for Mr. Modi to meet Nawaz Sharif for a bilateral meeting. That's your position, and therefore if Mr. Modi does meet him, it would be wrong for Mr. Modi to do so. Let me put that concern to you, because it's a concern, Mr. Pal, that many people share. And they put it like this. They say, after taking a strong stand against Pakistan meeting Hurriyat before Pakistan meets Indians, and after Nawaz Sharif just last week clearly reiterated that he would meet Kashmiri leaders before he meets India, won't Mr. Modi look as if he's done an embarrassing U-turn if he now forgets about all of that and meets Nawaz Sharif?
Well, don't forget, it would be as much of a climb down for Mr. Sharif, who has said categorically that he will consult the Kashmiri leaders before he resumes a dialogue with India. If Mr. Sharif then wants to meet our Prime Minister, both Prime Ministers are basically then saying, yes, we did make a certain point for a domestic political audience, but now the greater needs of both countries demand that we act sensibly and talk.
Except for the fact that it's not Mr. Sharif who's asking for the meeting. Mr. Sharif, on arrival, has let it be known that he's prepared to meet Mr. Modi if the initiative comes from the Indian side. Now, given the background I've sketched out, can Mr. Modi take that initiative without looking as if he's embarrassing himself and doing a U-turn?
You know, Mr. Sharif has shown, Mr. Modi has shown again and again over the last few months that he has an infinite capacity to surprise us by his flexibility. And it's a very welcome flexibility. Who would have thought that having taken the stand that he had in opposition to Pakistan and any possibility of even attempting a rapprochement with Pakistan, that the first thing he would do is to invite SAARC leaders, including the Prime Minister.
So you're saying to me that because he's got the capacity to surprise us on other things, as he has many times, he may surprise us here and he may do a U-turn, even if people like me ask, is it embarrassing?
I would think that is a very good chance, and I would welcome it if he does.
Let me put it like this, Kanwal Sibal. The problem with the position that Mr. Modi took about Pakistan not talking to Hurriyat is that he was actually asking Pakistan to give up its well-established, decades-old policy. And it was a policy to which even Mr. Vajpayee had absolutely no objection. Now, I put it to you, Mr. Modi has a choice. Either to continue to make what many consider an unreasonable demand of Pakistan, or use SAARC as a clever way of finessing it and getting off the hook. Why not use this opportunity to get off the hook?
Well, I don't think the responsibility lies on Modi's shoulders. You know, you are, the argument that you are giving is that Modi is all in the wrong, Pakistan is completely in the right, and they were right in meeting the Hurriyat. India has no reason to object simply because Vajpayee in the past had done so that if a mistake was committed, that mistake should be perpetuated, even if the circumstances have changed. I don't think this is a persuasive argument. There's a new government, a new leader, and yes, of course, we have to take into account past history and past, but where mistakes have been committed, we have to rectify them. And why is it that, why is it being argued that Pakistan's position is reasonable, that they must talk to the separatists before they talk to the government of India? I don't accept that.
Okay, let me put it like this, Mr. Park. Mr. Modi's tough stand has actually put Pakistan into an unenviable corner. Clearly, Nawaz Sharif has tried to internationalize the issue as a response. It's failed, and Mr. Sharif has actually admitted as much, because he said that he's deeply concerned about the silence of the UN and the international community. Secondly, President Obama is coming to India. He's not going to Pakistan. And once again, Mr. Sharif feels snubbed. Given the way things are developing, why should this be the moment when India backs off rather than stands by its position? Because this position seems to be yielding results.
I would ask, what results? Does it help India to make Pakistan feel isolated and insecure? It doesn't. Because when the Pakistani establishment, which is shorthand for the Pakistani army, feels insecure, it tends to react rather badly. And therefore, precisely because there is now a mismatch not only in the actual strength of Pakistan and India, but also in the perceptions that the international community holds, I think from a position of strength, an act of generosity on the part of India does Pakistan no favors, quite frankly. It simply creates a situation in which we can move forward pragmatically.
Let me put it like this, Mr. Sibal. At the end of the day, India accepts that Kashmir is a dispute. We don't deny that.
No, we
Secondly,
don't accept that.
Well, we do, because we're discussing it with Pakistan. Let me finish the question. Let me finish the question, then you answer it. We accept it's a dispute. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking to Pakistan.
It's an issue.
Let's not quarrel over terminology. It's a dispute. Secondly, it's a dispute that not only involves India and Pakistan, it clearly, categorically involves the Kashmiri people. Has Mr. Modi drawn an indefensible red line by saying, don't consult the Kashmiris? They're at the very core of the dispute.
No, I think we can put it quite differently. That if you come and occupy my house forcibly and create a dispute and say that it's a dispute, no, you forcibly come and entered into my house, and unfortunately, I am not in a position to evict you by force. because the international circumstances have changed. In any case, at a particular point in time, I half shifted you out of, evicted you from my house and left you in possession of half the house. Yes, it is a dispute in the sense that if we accept the dispute, there are legal ramifications.
Let's not quarrel over whether it's a dispute or not. It is, even if you don't want to accept it. The point is, it's a dispute that involves the Kashmiris, and is Mr. Modi drawing an indefensible red line by saying, don't consult them?
This is precisely the position Pakistan is taking when they call for a plebiscite and go back to the UN resolution. This means involving the Kashmiri people. Now, our arguments over the last so many decades is that a lot of water has flowed over the bridge. We have consulted the wishes of the Kashmiri people time after time in elections, in democratic elections, even if some of them were not free and fair.
So we don't need to consult them again?
We have consulted them already and repeatedly, and we're going to consult them again in a few days.
You're arguing in favor of talks, you're arguing in favor of the two prime ministers meeting, you're saying that they should always be meeting and talking. Now, even if that position is correct, the civilian government in Pakistan doesn't call the shots over Kashmir, the army does. So if talks are essential, surely we should be talking to the army generals, not Nawaz Sharif.
Well, there are 2 points. Firstly, the army generals are not going to talk to us at the moment. Secondly, Kashmir is not the only issue between Pakistan and India. It is by far from being the most important issue. There are dozens of other issues that we need to work on together, many of which we need to resolve, including the very vexed problem of water.
And terror.
And terror. Now, all of these are issues on which Mr. Sharif is not going to talk to the Kashmiris, to consult the Kashmiris. He is going to talk directly to us. So, by focusing only on what he says on Kashmir, we are in fact, in a way, accepting the Pakistani agenda for talks, rather than a much more broad-based agenda, which is what India has always urged upon the Pakistanis.
Let me put it like this, Mr. Sibal. At the end of the day, Mr. Modi's real target for India is 9% growth. He wants to change our lives. He wants to create jobs. He wants to improve livelihoods. And all of that is dependent upon a sizable sum of FDI coming in. The Kashmir issue is an opportunity lost because it holds the whole process up for India. It's not in any way a similar opportunity lost for Pakistan. Therefore, I put it to you, it's in Mr. Modi's interest and India's interest that you resolve Kashmir. And if resolving Kashmir means meeting Mr. Sharif, regardless of what the circumstances are, meet him 1,000 times.
Well, this is an argument I've heard before. Now, if you really look back, the Kashmir problem was at its height at the end of 1989, 1990. 1991, we opened up our economy, and look at the kind of response we got in terms of Americans became the biggest investors in our country for many years. It's a different matter that later on the reforms process started getting stalled. And
so you're saying that just as Kashmir wasn't an obstacle in 91, it won't be an obstacle
not at all, not at all.
Investment coming in now?
Absolutely. We have lived with this Kashmir problem, and as I said, at the time when we really broke with the past and started inviting
You're
FDI.
saying if we've lived with it for 65 years, we can live for another 65?
I don't know about that. It depends on Pakistan, but I don't think it's going to really hamper our economic development or our growth. Yes, we could do better. It might be marginally better, but Pakistan is not a big economic player so far as we are concerned. We can live without Pakistan. I don't see a problem.
Mr. Modi can achieve 9% growth and tackle Kashmir. He doesn't have to resolve Kashmir to achieve 9%.
It happened during Manmohan Singh's time. We reached 9% growth, and we still had a huge problem with Pakistan.
All right, gentlemen, we've reached an end of a very fascinating discussion where clearly the two sides are going to reconcile over this issue. This is a decision of the Prime Minister now faces. Will he, won't he meet Nawaz Sharif? I guess we'll know in 48 hours. My thanks to both of you.